Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. While we've all been affected by this great crisis, I hope that it hasn't affected any of your family and friends, or maybe even your jobs or business. But we've come together today to talk about the different opportunities that we'll have in this potential economy at getting to as quick of a recovery as possible. We've got three great speakers today that will cover the crisis from different angles. First, starting with Carl Muir, who's a US tax accountant and a proud member of the American Club of Brussels. If you haven't joined his beer club events, I would definitely recommend joining them as soon as we're allowed to go on those again. Gregory Goossens, who's a Belgian tax attorney. He'll be covering some of the Belgian sides of things. And Mary-Louise Soreto, who is the Executive Director of American Citizens Abroad, your advocacy and lobbying service for all American expats. If you have not joined, I would highly recommend joining. My name is Brian Dunhill. I'm a financial advisor that helps American expats, a past president of the American Club of Brussels. And I promise you, you'll be hearing the least of me today unless we don't come up with good questions for these great panelists. The few things that I would like to cover in this economy, we are not at a bottom point just yet. And we won't be until one key variable is sorted out. And that's to where we've been pushing out this great piece that Atish Bhatia has put together in collaboration with Minute Physics. Now, on this, it's showing us the exponential curve of the growth when it comes to the number of cases of Corona-19 and when they drop off. We actually have the wrong slide in there, and I apologize for that. So essentially, when we send the follow-up, it will have the right slide that will have the drop down in the different places. And this is where we're finding that different countries are getting lockdowns lifted at different key times. We've seen Australia, New Zealand almost combat and beat this whole crisis, whereas other countries like the United States have not fallen off the curb. And this is the key variable to where things are going to come back into place. We have regular economic updates. This is not that regular economic update, so I don't want to take up too much time with this. But if you're interested in our full thoughts of where the recovery is going to come from, we can send you in the follow-up of this, we'll include the recording of our last economic update, and our next one will be July 15th. Which will be published on the American Club of Brussels website. I would like to start by introducing Carl Muir. Mr. Muir is an accountant working with several corporations throughout his career. He's been involved with the U.S. income tax preparation reporting through H&R Blocks and now independently through Muir Taxes. As a tax consultant for U.S. expats, he can provide advice on filing requirements and compliance to the United States on tax and financial reporting issues. Carl's received his Bachelor's of Arts with International Relations and Business from USC, and he will play you that chant if you don't ask him to, or if you ask him to. He also holds a Master's of Administration in Accounting from the University of Phoenix. He speaks both English and habla español. So from there, I will pass it on to you, Carl.
All right, thank you, Brian. Who's controlling the slides? Is Cam or? Oh, okay. First off, on the IRS or Congress, more or less, has voted for a couple little packages, and the last one was called the CARES Act. The CARES Act was the first thing that, or before that, the CARES Act, it was the People's First Act, and it was to change the filing due date in the United States from April 15th to July 15th. But as most of you know, that if you live outside the United States, your filing due date is June 15th, but that has also been changed to July 15th. So all due dates for all tax returns is July 15th. As far as FBARs, there's no change to that, because if you didn't file by April 15th, you get an automatic extension till October. So, and most of the changes for the due dates is within almost any return that you need to do, even for corporations. Okay. And what the People's First Initiative also did was to postpone any taxes due from either your due date of April 15th or June 15th to July 15th. And that includes any other things that's going on, audits, appeals, compromise installment agreements. If you're paying your paying back taxes on installments, you can actually could have stopped it and begin again in July 15th. So, okay. The last act is the Corona Aid and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act. This is more the stimulus package to boost a little bit on the economy. I'm only going to be covering the individual tax provisions. As far as businesses, a lot of it only entails US businesses as far as protection of paychecks and all that, because it's only to assist American or citizens or residents and the economy, those living in the US. But the biggest thing here is what they call the economic impact payment. And next slide, which is what most of you could have received or heard about it. If you have not, I'll show you how to look it up. But basically, you'll get $1,200 each for each taxpayer, which is $2,400 if you file jointly, and $500 for each qualifying child under the age of 17. So our US or citizens or US persons living abroad eligible. Next slide. Yes, according to the IRS, you are, and it's indicated on their website that all US citizen living abroad is entitled to this payment. And of course, there's a phase out as far as your income. Now, one thing that if your your income is 100,000, now if you do take the earned income exclusion, well, now your adjusted gross income could be down to zero, or it could be reduced if your income is a little bit higher, but you had about 103,000 excluded. So now you actually can get below this phase out and actually get more of the or be eligible for the actual payments. Next. So how to check your status on your EIP check. Okay, you go to the website for the IRS. This is the link for it. You'll use the application, what they call Get My Payment. You'll check your payment status. You can confirm what type. Possibly you can, but my understanding is that the due date for putting in bank information was May 13th. And if you have moved since last year and you've not filed your 2019 tax return, and they're going to mail you a check, it may go to your old address. Next slide, please. So this is basically on the web page, the link that's right there. You'll click on where it says Get My Payment. You'll get this screen where it says this government system is for authorized you. So you put OK. And then this is the screen where you need to put it on there. You need to put your social security number without hyphens. The date of your birthday must be the formats used in the US, and what's most important is the way you put your address. You need to put the house number first and then the street. If you put the street first and then the house number, it will just say the information does not agree with their records, so that you won't get a status at that point. And then you put in your postal code. Now, these are different messages you could get. If you get the messages need more information, you can put in your bank information. Now, you have to have a US bank account to do this. Or you can get that if you have already been receiving a refund from the IRS, they have your bank information. They'll tell you when it was deposited into your bank account. Or you can get the one that says, they've already mailed out the check. Now, you could get one that says payment status not available. It could be that they are not sure if you're going to get it, or maybe they're waiting for you to file the 2019, and possibly it's because maybe they don't have your correct records, or you are not eligible because your income was too high last year. Now, if you are not required to file a tax return, you can still get this stimulus check. You'll have to use this link, which is for non-filers. Now, if you're retired and you receive Social Security, but you have no other income really to report, it doesn't put you over to, or as far as to the US, then you don't have to file any tax returns. You don't have to do anything because the Social Security, they already have your records. Now, if you don't have to file a tax return because you're below the limit, especially if you're a student, or if you have a child that is not really your dependent anymore, but they're a student, they can go on here and they can get actually this check. Plus, if you are in Social Security and if you do have, or some kind of other non-taxable income that you don't need to report, but you have dependents that are under 17, you can also go on the site to add them on so you can get the additional benefits, okay? Now, one other thing that's changed with this is that some people, maybe because of the what's going on and they've lost their jobs or they're not working that much, you can actually pull money out of your retirement if you're not 59 and a half yet and don't have a penalty, an early withdrawal penalty. So, and these were the requirements. So if you have questions, we can go over that, another time. Next, these are the types of things that, type of plans that are eligible. And then also, if you pull out the money, it can almost be considered a loan that if you pay it back within a 3-year repayment period, you don't have to pay tax on it. This is something that's new for next year. If you do file your tax return and you do have contributions, but you don't itemize, which since the tax reform, a lot of people don't itemize anymore, but you can take up to a $300 deduction on your tax on your income for any qualified charitable contributions. And most of these are that if they're US contributions. Some international contributions do count, but the IRS website will give you that information. Congress just last week introduced, or the House of Representatives introduced a new bill, which they call the HEROES Act, which is the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions. It may have a tough fight in the Senate because there are things that members of the Senate don't agree on here. Not everything is really has to do with to help with the economy, and I think that's what they're probably testing. So it may not or may not go through. I think that eventually something will go through that we will probably get additional benefits, and I would think that one of them would be possibly to get another round of the stimulus checks. Whether any of the other issues happened, all we can do is wait. Okay. If you need more information on COVID-19 considering tax, the IRS does have a dedicated website. It's www.irs.gov/coronavirus. And you can go on there and you find all of the information or more detail on any of these things that I discussed. Now, the IRS does warn, like everything else, there's always scams and frauds. And like this disclaimer that's on the bottom here, basically the IRS will never call, text you, email you, or contact you on social media, or ask for any of your personal bank account information, even on these. So basically, there are, of course, the bad guys out there that want to steal money. They will target the elderly probably. And even though we may be abroad, they could target us somehow through correspondence or whatever, but just be wary about this. So, and if you need more information, if you go to my website, that's the link. I had issued in the month of April several newsletters with different news about the IRS, COVID-19 and what's going on. And there's several other links on there, and you can pull those up and find more information, whether it's the IRS or the Department of Treasury or the health department, whatever they're called again. Okay. And if you do have any questions or you need to contact me, this is my email. My website does have, I mentioned, you know, other information on there as well on taxes. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carl. That was extremely informative. And just as a few administrative items, if you have some questions in between and you want to talk to any of the panelists while the presentation's going on, please feel free to use the chat feature down in the lower portion. Otherwise, we will have the panel session with any questions that you might have while going on. Noticing one of our guests today, I will put in a little thought on Carl's piece that we can make taxable donations. In Belgium, we're able to use the King Baudouin Foundation for a lot of the organizations that you can donate to, including the Fulbright Scholarship that we're very proud of, and that we have a great partnership with the American Club of Brussels. We have a great article that we'll include in the follow-ups on how you can do this with either cash or stock positions directly to the King Baudouin Foundation, but a wonderful way to give back. So thank you, Carl, for that. That was great. Our next speaker is going to be Gregory Goossens, who's a Belgian tax attorney. He graduated in law in 2004 from the University of Antwerp and graduated in 2005 as a master's in tax law. After a short career as a tax consultant, he moved to become an attorney in 2006. Gregory specializes in tax law with a focus on negotiations with the tax authorities and defending clients' interests in tax disputes in court proceedings. So hope that you don't have to use his services for that. Gregory is also a lecturer and has his law practice up in Antwerp. He's a proud member of the American Club of Brussels, so we thank him for that, and I will pass it over to him for his presentation.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So obviously, Belgian authorities have issued quite a few measures as well. In principle, we can divide them in three categories. Mainly, it's financial support, state aid support. That's the first category that we'll briefly focus on. Secondly, we have the tax measures, mainly tax deferral that give you additional payment terms. And then thirdly, we also have obviously a large set of measures for workforce related issues, so people in employment or self-employment. Obviously, because of the rather complex political situation in Belgium, we have measures at federal, regional, and local levels, mainly federal and regional. Local level, the only measure for now at local level is that the municipal surcharge that you pay on your income tax might be reduced. Today was actually the deadline for the cities and municipalities to potentially reduce the surcharge on your income tax payments. So that will become clear in following weeks to what extent this has been reduced, depending obviously on where you live exactly in Belgium. There have been a huge set of measures. It's really becoming a maze of 8 measures. I'm going to briefly guide you through all these measures. So we can move to the next slide. So first of all, there is, okay, I see they jumped a little on the slide, but anyway, all the info is there. So the European Commission obviously has introduced aid for startups and small and medium enterprises. And obviously, because normally state aid is prohibited and a government cannot help its companies in a normal circumstances, but obviously due to COVID-19, European Commission has announced that it will be quite flexible in terms of allowing state aid to support local economy. Now, the first set of measures at the federal level has to do with obviously payment deferral for existing corporate loans and credits. And so all types of loans and credits that have been granted will, as a general rule, be extended for several months extra without penalties or interest increase. So that's important for small and medium enterprises, private individuals who are active as freelancers or self-employed, and nonprofit organizations. And then there's also a guaranteed credit program. This is actually accessible through your bank, so you cannot access the guarantee scheme directly. It's accessible through your bank. And then what possibly is more important for our audience, that's the so-called bridging allowance. And the bridging allowance is in French called the droit passerelle, is actually a sort of bridging right for self-employed individuals who have their self-employed activity as a main activity or additional activity, and they can apply for this monthly allowance since the month of March. Now we're in May, so it's the third time that the authorities pay out this droit passerelle. It's around €1,200 if you're in a full-time self-employed activity, and with children it's up to €1,600. So be careful that the €1,600 or €1,200 or whatever amount is paid to you is indeed taxable income. So potentially half of it you will have to give away next year when you do your tax filing for 2020. So yeah, the amount that is paid out now is actually a gross amount. You can apply for it through your Social Security fund. So if you're registered as a freelancer in Belgium, almost every Social Security fund in Belgium has now a page available for the droit passerelle. The application is pretty straightforward, but you don't get it automatically. You still have to apply for it, because the underlying reasoning is that you should have at least reduced activity due to the recent events. So in essence, if you're not affected by the corona crisis, then you're also not entitled to the bridging allowance. Then specifically for Brussels, and that's more for businesses that had to close down. I can think of restaurants and related activities. So they are allowed a €4,000 premium. And then there's also a compensation, which for those companies or businesses that were not required to close down, but suffered a significant loss in turnover, they're also allowed a premium of up to €2,000. And then also, of course, local initiatives in Brussels for hotel and catering sector. Yeah, the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we have a political situation that allows the regions to have different measures. So now for Corona nuisance premium, that's sort of the same. You can see if you compare it to the Walloon region, it's a bit more. So you get €5,000 in the Walloon region if your business is registered there. If you had to close down during the weekend, it's only 2.5. While in Flanders, for example, it's 2,000. And yeah, so they're all a bit different, the measures, but in a way, they're also quite similar. So there's local initiatives, aid to tourism, agriculture and horticulture sector, emergency loans to support cash flow of cultural and creative businesses. In the Walloon region, they also allow more flexible payment plans for companies to pay their monthly water bill or quarterly water bill, and also additional support measures for health, social, and employment sectors. Due to the limited time we have, I'm not able to go into detail in all of them, but obviously if you have questions, I can further answer them afterwards. So the next slide, that shows actually, it's unfortunately in Flemish. We don't have many English newspapers in Belgium. It's a Flemish article that says Corona support shows the Belgian mentality. So actually what it's about, apparently there was around 400,000 droit passerelle already paid out to self-employed that applied for it in combination with the Corona nuisance premiums. And apparently there's a lot of abuse involved. So people declare that they don't, that they're seriously affected by Corona crisis, while indoors they just continue working as if nothing happened. So I'm not saying obviously that's not the case for the larger part, but it was quite obvious that this droit passerelle, which is quite flexibly paid out these days, would lead to abuse and payment to companies and individuals that are initially not really entitled to it. But apparently there will be some auditing afterwards. They hired around 10, 15 auditors to afterwards check if people who applied and received the bridging rights and other premiums, that to double check whether they're actually entitled to it or not. And if not, yeah, potentially you're facing to having to pay back the premium that you received earlier. So the next slide. So the first part was about the financial aid. This part is more about tax relief and tax deferral. So again, at federal level, in general, most measures that have been taken are in support of businesses and companies, as well as self-employed individuals. Employees, obviously, yeah, they can benefit from unemployment if they are not able to continue working. If you're actually ill, you can claim invalidity. But as such, if I compare it to cross-presentation, we don't have many measures that are specifically focused on households or private individuals as such, apart from an employment context. So nothing that you can take out any pension from your fund or anything. That for now, we haven't seen anything like that. So up till now, most of the measures that have been taken are in view of supporting business and employment and economy in general. So briefly, the federal measures for tax relief and tax deferral. So we have the possibility to make advanced tax payments. Both companies and private individuals, business owners have that. Now you get a bonus if you're a company. You get a bonus when you make advanced tax payments. And now they announced that the bonus you get for advanced tax payments in the third and fourth quarter this year will be higher compared to other years. So you can wait with making these advanced payments and do them in Q3 or either Q4. In general, there's also been filing extensions for corporate tax filings and corporate non-resident tax filings. For now, the individual tax filings, so the resident tax filings for 2019, are still due according to the normal deadlines. So by mid-July, if you file online. So for now, we have not seen any extension of filing deadlines. Perhaps they will be extended later in June or in July, but nothing has been confirmed yet. When it comes to tax assessments that you have received, when it comes to income tax, inheritance tax, transfer tax, road tax, all those tax assessments that arrived after 12 March, so the day of the lockdown, the lockdown started in Belgium, those are automatically entitled to an additional 2 months extension. So you always have 2 months to make a payment, but now it is increased to 4 months. So if you imagine you received it, let's say early April, then you have until end of July to make your tax payment. Also, if you're into employment, and again, that's more a measure for companies, the employers rather than the employees. So there have been an extension for payroll withholding tax payments. So that means that payroll tax that has been withheld on your gross salary does not have to be forwarded to the authorities. The companies employers can keep them, use them for other means, and make the payment later on in the tax year. Also for VAT filings, so both companies and self-employed will have to make quarterly VAT filings, and quarterly VAT payments have additional filing deadlines and extensions, and as well as payment terms. So this has all been delayed as well. In general, any tax assessment that has arrived before 12 March, that was obviously due before the lockdown, or that arrived before the lockdown started, can benefit from additional tax payment terms. You can ask for a payment plan with the tax authorities. You don't get them automatically, but they do allow them. But you do have to request them. Again, they're quite flexible these days, but you still have to request for additional payment terms. And then obviously also we have donations for medical device, protective gear made by companies, and individuals can be deducted as well in the tax filing. So next slide, please. We're looking then at some regional measures. So as I already said, all the measures are quite similar. Nevertheless, you have to check the tax authorities' websites, let it be the federal one, let it be the regional one, where you can see to what specifically you're entitled to. Now, specifically for Brussels, the city tax, Brussels city tax for the first half of 2020 has been cancelled. So if you receive a bill for that, it will be only later this year and only for half a year. The Flanders region, property tax, so the real estate tax that is due on buildings and offices has also been delayed. So they will only be sent out second part of 2020. As I mentioned earlier, also road tax, annual road tax, and the one-time car registration tax can also benefit from additional payment terms, in principle 4 months extra. Then as it is at the federal level, there's also a huge flexibility at regional level to request payment plans. So if you're in a financial difficult position, you can always request this. And then also for inheritance tax and transfer tax is for example, tax that is due when you buy a new property in Belgium. So for those, there is additional payment terms as well. Walloon region, again, they're quite similar, but you'd have to check your local regional website for that from the tax authorities. And then the next slide is about workforce related. So obviously everything that has to do with employment, there's quite a few measures for that as well. So there is additional payment terms for Social Security contributions. There's additional payment terms, as I mentioned earlier, for the payroll tax withholding. Now, if people, many people are forced to work from home, and there is now a fast-track process to obtain a tax ruling from the authorities to make the allowance that you get for working from home to be fully exempt from taxes and Social Security. The maximum amount is around 130 euro that you can get per day from your employer. It can be less, but that depends on what your employer allows. But in essence, you still have to apply for a tax ruling. I mean, not every employee individually, but this is done at the level of the company to make sure that these allowances for working from home are tax-free. But yeah, as I said, there's a fast-track process because a normal tax ruling can take between 3 to 6 months. So that's why they now give priority to the teleworking allowances. Then other measures worth mentioning, the cross-border employment, we had many questions about those. So people who are living in Belgium, working abroad, obviously are now faced with forced working from home. We call them the COVID-19 working days. Belgium has signed agreements with the Netherlands, Germany, France, and Luxembourg, which come down to the fact that normally the people that work abroad are taxed abroad because you're physically, you're taxed where you're physically working. So people that work in France are taxed in France, although they have their tax residency in Belgium. Now they work from home. So in principle, those days suddenly become taxable in Belgium. Now, because of those agreements signed with those neighboring countries, people will not be taxed in Belgium for the days working from home, but those days will be considered foreign working days. So there's only agreements with the countries mentioned. Unfortunately, we have more than 100 tax treaties, but no agreements apart from those. So we had questions about US, about Finland, about Italy, and unfortunately, there has been no clarification for people working from home who normally work in US, Italy, Finland, other countries. So we still have to wait. Potentially there will be a general rule or agreement which apply to all bilateral tax agreements, that those days will still be considered foreign working days. But at this point, we only have clarity for those 4 countries. If it can be of any comfort, any tax audits that were normally planned for this period have been postponed. So non-urgent tax audits will not take place for the time being. Normally July and August is quiet as well. So we would expect if any audits take place, this would only happen second part of this year. Obviously, this is, yeah, we're only mid-May. A lot of things are still happening. We're still expecting quite a few measures. So yeah, we have to keep an eye on our website. We also publish a newsletter, obviously with a focus on international employment and global mobility. But obviously, yeah, you have to take a look now and then on the tax authority's website, or if you're self-employed, have a look at your Social Security's fund website, where there's also obviously a lot of information. So yeah, that's my contribution about the Belgian measures.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gregory. That's extremely informative. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of questions on that, because that was a lot of information in a short period of time. But we've got one more presentation, and then we'll get to all those Q&As. And our last speaker is Mary Louise Serrato. She is the director and managing director of American Citizens Abroad, which is a partner organization of the American Club of Brussels. We do a lot of events with them. That makes her the key liaison with Washington legislation and administrative offices, including the Congressional Office, the IRS, the Treasury, the Joint Committee to Taxation, the Senate Finance Committee, and the House and Ways Committee. So you're hearing it straight from the source. So I will pass it over to Mary Louise now.
Mute. Brian, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry. I don't know if you can see me, but hopefully you can see the screen if you can't see me. So I just wanted to thank Brian from Dunhill Financial and also the American Club in Brussels to let us participate. I'm coming back to my roots. I actually lived in Brussels in the mid-90s to early 2000s. Was a great time. We really enjoyed our life in Brussels and in Belgium. So thank you again for having me. So American Citizens Abroad, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about our organization and the work we do, and then some helpful tips on how we can help you with your recovery rebates and other services that we have. So American Citizens Abroad was originally created in Geneva, Switzerland in 1978. And our founding issues were actually getting the vote from abroad and some citizenship issues that the founders had with their children who were born abroad. And also representation in Congress. So we gather up the community interests and issues and present them to Capitol Hill. We try to create and find pragmatic solutions to some of these problems. So you can go to the next slide. So we had an organizational transformation. We, like I said, we're based in Switzerland. We found over time we would do annual door knockers. We would come 3 and 4 times a year, but that they weren't really effective. We were spending a lot of time educating offices over and over again about who we are. And we recognized that we really needed to have an ongoing presence in Washington, DC. And we also needed to have formalized organizations. The Congress, the administration, the IRS, the Treasury, they like working with organizations that they can identify and they know how they're formulated. So in 2012, we moved our headquarters to Washington, DC, and we created 2 organizations, the Advocacy Organization, which is a 501c4, and our foundation, the American Citizens Abroad Global Foundation, which is a 501c3, and they do our fundraising and educational and also research work. Next slide. So the advantages of being in Washington, D.C., number one, we're the only organization representing Americans overseas that are headquartered in Washington, D.C. We are able to provide pragmatic, quote unquote, doable solutions. We have a good understanding of the offices that we need to speak to, because a lot of times the community thinks the problems need to be addressed through legislation or through Congress. And a lot of times we see that we can do it through regulatory changes and work with the IRS, work with Treasury and other avenues. We have a professional team of experts here in Washington, D.C., and we also have our executive board, our executive committee, sorry, and our boards, which are not quote unquote headquartered in Washington, D.C. or located in Washington, D.C. because we have a lot of our team and board members are living worldwide. We have a respected relationship with congressional offices. This we've been building on with our 40-year experience, obviously, and we have strong relationships with stakeholders and offices on Capitol Hill. And that's, I can't tell you how important it is really to be here and to be recognized by those offices and have those offices and stakeholders and other groups working like-minded organizations, knowing that you're here in Washington, D.C., knowing that they can just call you up and you can come in for a meeting and they can get the information from you. So next slide. I have 3 slides that go through a lot of our key actions in this year and last year and years before. One of the recent things that we did is we advocated to ensure that overseas Americans would be included in the COVID legislation relief and the CARES Act. We have testified to the IRS and Treasury. We did that on the transition tax, which I'm sure a lot of you on this call are familiar with, and the guilty regulations, how they affected small U.S. businesses. We've developed products like the ACA SDFCU banking product, which I'll talk about later. We've done extensive work on RBT and did analysis side by side comparatives of where you have to change the current code to get to RBT. We've submitted testimony. We've provided documentation, information, and data to the Government Accountability Office on several of their studies. Next slide. We were instrumental in increasing the threshold for the FATCA filing, developing also same country exemption, which we hope if adopted would really reduce the lockout that a lot of Americans overseas are seeing with foreign banks. We were instrumental in providing the IRS with what is now the Streamlined Foreign Offshore Program, the non-willful program, as we recognize that a lot of people got caught up in the willful programs when they weren't. They simply just didn't know what their tax obligation was. They had no idea that perhaps a foreign pension needed to be disclosed on an FBAR. So there were a lot of people who were not willful and shouldn't have been adversely hit by the penalties. You can go on to the next slide to give you just a flavor. We brought to light a lot of the serious concerns, obviously in legislative concerns and regulatory concerns, which resulted in the introduction of HR 597, which is a presidential commission to investigate. We've developed a expat tax services directory because ACA, especially during tax time, but even throughout the year, we get hundreds of thousands of emails asking us, how do I file my taxes? How do I do this? How do I ensure that I've correctly set up my assets in the U.S. and also overseas with wills and estate planning? So we ourselves are not a tax professionals. We can't dispense that information. So we have an expat directory, and we send all those people over, all those questions over, and reference them to our directory to find resources. Again, we've testified to the National Taxpayer Advocate. That's a great voice of the people into the IRS. And we've done a lot of work that has been cited in U.S. judicial rulings. And obviously, one of our premier issues was citizenship, and we were really instrumental in changing the citizenship laws back in 1978 to help facilitate getting US citizenship for children of US citizens who were born overseas. So going on, next slide. Our current advocacy work, what we've been doing. Residence-based taxation, obviously that's our big push. We've worked on developing a side-by-side. It's not a piece of legislation, but it's a roadmap, so to speak, for Congress to write legislation. We launched a campaign calling for hearings, the Tax Fairness for Americans Abroad, an idea worth fighting for. The real step right now, if we want to get legislation moving in the House and people really thinking about this, is to have hearings. This is the official arena, so to speak, where Congress gets all the data, all the information about the problems that are out there. It all goes on record. And this makes it really easy for the offices that are involved in writing legislation to go back and to have an official source to pick into, to say, this is where the problems are. Here's a report that was put together by ACA, or here's a report that was put together by another tax organization. And that's really, really instrumental, as are testimonials from people and on the ground living this, and organizations like ACA that has a huge wealth of knowledge on it. We also funded revenue estimates. We raised money in order to see with our side-by-side, which again is just a proposal, but if Congress were to create legislation and take all those elements, what would it cost the Treasury? Because we know that that's always sort of a burning question. How much is it going to cost? We were able to make it revenue neutral. I won't bore you about how we did that, but that whole report is hugely important to our work and to the community work. We've presented it to the Joint Committee of Taxation, to the Senate Finance, to the House Ways and Means. So they actually now have a lot of very accurate numbers on the size of the community, the makeup of the community, and the tax base of the community. Next slide. So you've probably heard that there was a bill that was introduced into Congress by Congressman Holding called the Tax Fairness for Americans Abroad Act. We worked very closely with Congressman Holding's office on this, and his intent was not so much to introduce a fully fleshed out piece of legislation, but to present a marker bill. This is often used in Congress. It's a bill to start a conversation that basically says, here's what in principle we want to see. Americans should be taxed the way all the rest of the industrialized world taxes their citizens. If you earn it in the country in which you are living, it is taxed by that authority. If not, it should not be taxed by the U.S. We again supported this with our call for hearings, and unfortunately, Congressman Holding is leaving office. He's not running for re-election in November. So it's true that he was a huge advocate, but he's not the only advocate in Congress. He's not the only office that's looking at this and working on this. And ACA is working to continue to cultivate those other congressional offices that are interested, and they are. They are. There's a lot more support for this than one would think. Next slide. So our campaign, I won't spend too much time on the campaign, but I urge you all to take a look at our website and to go to the link and to fill that out. You use your voting address, which is your last known residential address in the United States. And there's a pre-printed appeal that goes in asking your representatives in Congress to support hearings on the issues, all the issues of Americans living and working overseas with regard to legislation and regulatory efforts. And you can see, next slide, you can see our visual for our campaign. So a little bit, you can go to the next slide, that's fine. A little bit of some of the other advocacy work, the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Job Act, as some of you will be familiar with, had some awful requirements on the transition tax and GILTI provisions. Essentially, the U.S. looked at all U.S. businesses overseas in the same light as the large multinationals who were definitely offshoring profits, and not like the small American who may have had a yoga studio in France and was putting some money aside so she could buy more yoga mats. We highlighted this. We've written to the Treasury. Our solution to this is a de minimis rule. Just take the small players out completely. There have been some lightening of the rules, should we say, on the transition tax that takes those people back to sort of pre-TCJA, but still, we think a de minimis is probably the smartest way to go on this. Next. Passport revocation provision. This, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but if you have back taxes in the excess of 50,000, I believe, your passport can be revoked or not renewed. We've been monitoring the updates on this. Last April, there was some guidance for the IRS on this. We've been asking for a carve out for Americans who are overseas, understanding that and a U.S. passport when you're living overseas is a much different beast than a U.S. passport when you're living in the United States. For some people, it can really result in serious consequences, and it can stop people basically from being able to, have their livelihood if they don't have their passport. Something to keep in mind with the COVID crisis, this has all been suspended now. So as we understand it right now, there are no active passport revocation going through, and that's all been extended out. Next slide, thanks. So FATCA, we continue to advocate for same country exemption. Obviously, the ideal solution is residence-based taxation, but in the interim, we keep asking that Americans who have accounts who are legitimately resident in a foreign jurisdiction like Belgium, that their Belgian accounts are removed from the filing regime, removed for the individual and removed for the bank. And this would give banks the confidence that they don't have to worry about this person not being compliant. And gives the individual relief from that filing, and also the confusion between, I'm sure many of you know, between do I need to file a FATCA 8938, do I need to file an FBAR, do I need to file both, which has caused a lot of confusion in the community. So the next slide. So voting, we just launched 2 days ago our Voice Your Vote campaign. We encourage all Americans to share this campaign, to go out there and use it. Once again, you input your voting address and you can ask your representatives who are running for office and challengers who are running in your district their opinion on your issues. We do general updates to the community whenever there are, major congressional and presidential elections. But this year, we're really focusing on trying to get the community out to talk to the candidates and get your voice directly into those offices. We also do a lot of work with another really great organization, is the Overseas Vote Foundation. If you check out their website, you can see that you can request your ballot on their website, and they're just a really good organization doing a lot of great work on voting these Americans. Next. So a couple of things that we have for the community that are very helpful. We have the Expat Tax Services Directory. This is a really important resource for Americans. Like I said before, we get hundreds, thousands of emails coming in asking, how should I be filing my taxes? Do I need to file an FBAR? And we refer all those people over to the directory. Even with tax reform, you'd be surprised, Americans are still going to need professional services. A lot of Americans, if you look at how they're invested, are still highly invested in the United States. There's still A lot of people who have properties they're managing may need wills and estates to be drawn up in the United States. So this is a really, really helpful tool. We've expanded it out. We have not only tax preparers, but financial services and legal services. So next slide. And the ACA-Member SDFCU account. So as many of you know, it's been really hard in the past years for Americans to maintain a US-based bank account. And for a lot of reasons, it's a good thing to have a US-based bank account. The idea that you've expatriated and you've left and I'm not going to be doing business in the US, I don't really need it. It's really helpful if you want to build a credit rating in the United States. One never knows if you might come back. You don't know if you might have children or elder care needs and might need to have a US-based bank account. If you're receiving Social Security payments, this is really, really helpful. But a lot of banks with the Know Your Client regulations have closed banks of Americans overseas if they can't provide a US residential address. And they've gotten very good at now doing due diligence. And whereas in the past, I think people were using, their parents' address or cousin's address or a post office box, they're really doing due diligence and they're not accepting those addresses. So SDFCU, which is a federal credit union that services the State Department, it is not part of the State Department. It services their employees, and obviously because their employees are very mobile, they're very good at servicing expat and mobile communities. You don't need to have a US residential address to open up an account with them. You can do it online. Basically, you need to prove you're a US citizen, have a passport, Social Security number, potentially a copy of your Social Security card, and then just proof that you are living at the residence, the foreign residence that you claim is your residence. They have a wide range of product offerings, savings accounts, checking accounts, loans, lines of credits, IRAs. They've been very, very helpful with a lot of individuals who you've probably heard had their accounts frozen or their IRA accounts, 401ks frozen or completely liquidated, and had to find a new another financial institution who would take the account. And many of these individuals were able to roll over those accounts into SDFCU IRAs, and they didn't have the tax penalty associated. So that really helped a lot of individuals with that problem. And it can help with the, like I said, with deposit of your Social Security. If you're getting Social Security benefits, you can have it deposited into an SDFCU account, and then you can have those funds transferred to your foreign bank account. And because SDFCU works with, the State Department, they have relationships and know banks worldwide. It's amazing. The recovery rebates, as Carl mentioned early on, there were many problems with getting the foreign address initially into that tool. Actually, we worked a lot with the IRS to try to resolve those issues. They finally were able to resolve that, but it didn't really give people a whole lot of time to be able to get the direct deposit information, and that it has been shut down as of May 13th, the deadline to provide that. But you can still open up an SDFCU account because your check is probably going to get mailed to you at whatever last address you have. And if that's an overseas address, you have two ways to deposit that with SDFCU. You can mail it back to them, or you can do mobile with their mobile app, scan, take a picture and deposit, and do that through online banking. One caveat for that, there is a 30-day waiting period for that tool, but just know that your recovery rebate is going to be, that check is going to be good for probably 6 months and longer. Obviously, it doesn't get you the money immediately, and that could be an issue for some individuals. But this is a really great product. We've had great customer service. People have been really happy with it. So it's one way that we can help the community in particular at this time with the recovery rebates. So moving on, I don't think I have much else left, but post COVID, what are we going to do? Right now, as you can imagine, the Congress is pretty much shut down and not working. They're only starting to come back. The Senate is actually back in Washington, D.C. The Congress really isn't, although there's some offices that are back. We've stayed in contact with a lot of our direct contacts in, like I said, IRS, Treasury, and congressional offices throughout COVID. But coming out of this, we're going to continue to advocate for the hearings because we really do believe that that is the first step. We're going to use the CARES Act experience to really help us support our move towards residence-based taxation. We have a long laundry list of reasons why residence-based or RBT makes sense. But now we can add to that list the whole issue of the problems with the Get My Payment tool, the inability of small businesses overseas to fully access the CARES Act relief. And also, as some of you might be experiencing, the inability of joint filers to receive a stimulus due to one of the filers having a social security number and the other one having an ITIN, because the ITINs aren't accepted. We'll continue to meet with the IRS and Treasury and the State Department on better outreach to the Americans overseas. So for as long as you're going to have a tax regime based on citizenship, you need to really have the tools in place and the outreach. And that is, I'm sure many of you have experienced, is not ideal with the IRS and Treasury and even with the State Department. We're going to continue to add more write-in campaigns. We've seen great success with the hearing campaigns. We've had over 10,000 communications go in. We're starting with the voting campaign. Like I said, that's just a couple days old, but we're seeing good engagement. And we're going to continue to cultivate more partnerships here in DC and elsewhere with like-minded organizations, the business community, stakeholders to help us advance all our advocacy efforts. So last slide, I think. Oh, second to last slide. So getting the word out. We work in Washington, D.C. with other organizations to let them know what we're doing. We coordinate with the American clubs like the you folks here in Brussels and other organizations to try to keep people informed. We do regular press releases out to the media, try to directly engage with journalists. We do Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Our website is huge. We get, I think over, I'm probably not going to use the right figure, but I think it's about 500,000 visits per year to our website. And we've just started something that isn't on here. We have 2 podcasts. We have the ACA podcast, which is a podcast that talks about a lot of different issues, Americans, not just particularly tax and quote unquote our advocacy work. We just had a speaker on from Families in Global Transition talking about third culture children and other issues families face when they're expatriated and moving from country to country. And through our tax directory, we have our ACA Taxcast, and that is specifically on podcasts with information on tax issues. And obviously, we've been doing a lot of the recent podcasts on COVID-19. So I can get Brian those links and he can send them around to you. And the last slide. So how you can help, learn about ACA, visit our websites, join our write-in campaigns, in particular the tax fairness for Americans abroad. Join ACA, you get a newsletter, blast updates, email updates, and support our efforts. We're practically all volunteer organization, and we really rely on membership and donations to make all of this work here in Washington, D.C. So thank you for your time. I hope I didn't take up too much of it. And if you have questions, happy to answer.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mary Louise. That's extremely informative. Can I have all the speakers join back in? And even though we're a little over time right now, we'll open it up for any questions that anybody might have at this time. They were quite detailed slides, so it might be a little bit overwhelming for everyone, or we might have just covered all the material. From that vantage point, do we have Carl and Mary Louise on there as well?
I'm here.
Yeah, I
Good.
don't know if you can hear me. Oh, can you hear me? I'm here.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm here. Just cannot, I guess Cam needs to turn our video back on. I don't know.
Are you able to do that, or
It tells me that,
if I go down to my lower left box, there's a start video.
right.
The lower left.
Okay, the host has asked me to start again, so.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even see that. I'm sorry. Was I talking? And no one
There
said
you are.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I did that. I didn't. I tell you, I'm not good at technology. My children will tell you that. Sorry about that. Sorry, but hopefully the presentation wasn't too boring without a talking head.
No, it was perfect. It was spot on. We covered tons of material today, and I think what I'll ask each of you individually is, what should we expect next? What would you expect the next year to bring in your respective areas?
Me first?
Sure, we'll go in the order of the speakers.
I think we just need to, like I mentioned that the House of Representatives introduced the HEROES Act. The Senate already has rejected it, but they want other stuff. So I think they're going to go back like they normally do, back and forth, and hopefully, come up with something that does help American citizens, additional stimulus aids and stuff. And Trump had said also that he would favor another check to go out. So that can be also a push if the houses and the president already has said, well, at least send some more money out so we can anticipate that. And hopefully they have fixed the tool, like it was mentioned that there were problems with it. And, the slip around also as far as the address, I think I found that by accident, but I was getting all kinds of errors just for mine, for just seeking my information, and getting tons of emails from my clients. What do I do? Do I get it? I can't get this, so hopefully they fix that. And then if there is another roundabout that Americans can go in there and actually put their bank information in and not wait for their checks to come in. And then, if you don't have like, talking about what the credit union has as far as, a mobile deposit, then you have to figure out how to deposit into your bank in the US. But I think that's probably the thing we're going to look at. Is possibly maybe some other tax help. Maybe the SALT could be increased. The House of Representatives want to do that. So it would allow actually people to itemize again next year. But I don't think anything else is going to be going on. And I don't think the July 15th date will be moved on. Now, the only thing is that how much the IRS can process this year, considering that I've heard that none of the paper that they've received since the shutdown has been processed, and all of it was recently starting to be moved from boxes into trailers. And so if you mailed in your tax return, don't expect anything to be processed, I would say, for at least 6 months.
So from Gregory, we heard that there's no audits going on in Belgium. And from Carl,
well, yeah, that's correct, Brian. So it's all safe and sound here. No, not all bad. Well, I think for the measures that have been taken on, obviously most of them were like emergency measures. So there was a demand for it, and the authorities answered to some extent. And the measures that have been taken up till now all had to do with giving like financial breathing room to people and businesses. But obviously, yeah, I think we're only going to see the real economic impact of the past 2-3 months in the coming half year to a year. So how the authorities will reply to that, I think, remains to be seen. I think they're doing what they can at the moment, but it's difficult to predict what is still in store, because obviously this is a new situation for everybody, authorities included. So I think it will only become clear, and then purely at an economical level and a tax level, what will be the impact of that in the weeks and months to come. The measures to be taken, yeah, I presume that there's going to be more measures yeah, as we move along in 2020. Like, for example, the cross-border employment, like I said, we have now already agreements with surrounding countries, but what with other countries further away, will the whole work day suddenly become taxable here? So that's difficult to see at this point. How tax filing, for example, will take place next year, I mean, that's also really going to be a challenge, because we have this bubble in the middle of 2020. What would happen, for example, if we have another lockdown in the second part of 2020? Then, I mean, I presume it's going to be even worse. So I think we're going to see more measures as we come. Potentially, there will be going to be tax audits as there used to be, but I think we're going to have to count on some flexibility and leniency of the authorities. And I think they will certainly provide this and be flexible when it comes down to making tax payments, filing returns. I mean, yeah, I think it will all become clear in weeks to come. But at this point, I think the authorities have done what they could. And yeah, we're going to have to wait and see what's in store for foreseeable future.
Mary Louise?
So just one thing I wanted to mention, because Carl put it up on the different messages that you get. And he's right. If you get sort of that third message that says we don't have, it almost, I don't know what the language is, but it almost sounds like, you know, it's a fail, that you're not going to get a check. Sounds like, you know, but that's not the case. It's only because they're calculating to what Carl was mentioning. They either don't have enough information yet to actually calculate how much your recovery check is. So I think a lot of people have interpreted that as, oh my gosh, I'm not getting a recovery rebate check, because we've gotten emails from that, and that isn't the case. It just means that it's kind of still in the system. When it'll get out of the system is another question. But going forward, you know, it's really hard to know what exactly is going to happen. You know, we all are in a new reality here. At least from the legislation that's supporting the economy and individuals here in the United States, there is the bill that Carl mentioned that is probably going to have a hard time getting out of the Senate, but there's probably something that's going to be passed. The other thing we see on the horizon is obviously there are the elections coming up in the United States, so that's going to take up a lot of the oxygen, in particular with the COVID crisis. One thing we certainly see is that no matter what happens post-election, no matter who's president and who's holding the majority and minority in both houses, there's going to be even more tax legislation. Someone's going to have to pay this bill, and there's definitely going to be something coming out of this. So for ACA, we feel like that gives us an opportunity because people are going to be thinking about tax and thinking about this whole subject. So we're going to be using that opportunity. And again, our push is really to get hearings on this and to hopefully get some support to write legislation to either correct some of the problems, or you know, have a real full-on RBT bill. So we see an opportunity coming.
Lots to talk about. We have a question from Thomas Jansen, who said that his nonprofit, which is the Transatlantic Council of the Boy Scouts of America, applied for the PPP Small Business Administration loan, but were told that they didn't qualify since the staff did not reside in the United States. Any thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, that's what I think I mentioned at the beginning, that they wouldn't qualify because the act was looking at specifically for people work and live in the United States, where they wanted to, I guess, protect and help those that would become unemployed. I'm not sure there's other sectors of the business side that would help businesses abroad, like to help maybe with expenses and utilities and other stuff like that. But the PPP, I know won't, because it's specifically for citizens living in the United States.
And that, Brian, is one of the things that, again, we see sort of as a support point for RBT, because these very same businesses might have been subjected to the transition tax and guilty. So you fell into that basket for taxation purposes. And now on the other side, you can't get the relief because of exactly what Carl was mentioning.
Perfect. Well, I think we're running out of time. I know we're going to have plenty more to talk about over the course of the year. So I'm going to ask all the participants that if you found this useful, if you want us to drill down into deeper subjects, et cetera, please give us your feedback. Please drop them to Alex, who's the administrator over at the American Club of Brussels. Otherwise, myself at my email address. Her email address is info@americanclubbrussels.org. I tend to think that before the end of the year, we're going to see some tax changes, especially in Belgium, where we see them pretty much every year. So we'll be connecting with you, Gregory, to talk about those. But here in the United Kingdom, we're already talking about a new wealth tax and new tax legislation coming in, and we haven't even fully paid the bill. So I can only imagine what Belgium and the United States will come up with. So plenty of opportunities for more time to talk. But right now, I have to thank all three of you for wonderful presentations. It's been extremely informative. And I wish you and your families a safe time in these odd times right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Cam.